at the same time, Thoreau will find some problems with this wood chopper who he doesn't come to new ideas. By the way, did you notice that this was Thoreau's question when he hasn't seen somebody for a while? What new idea have you stumbled onto? I think it's a fair question to ask the people you really love. What new ideas? What new thoughts? Because if you're still listening to the same music, still eating the same food, still playing with the same ideas, Thoreau's going to see that as a lack of growth, a lack of evolution. Well, he finishes visitors with some observations like this. Many a traveler came out of his way to see me, and inside of my house, and as an excuse for calling, asked for a glass of water. I told them that I drank at the pond and pointed thither, offering to lend them a dipper. Far off as I lived, I was not exempted from that annual visitation which occurs, methinks, about the 1st of April, when everybody is on the move. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales always standing behind everything Thoreau is writing about the spring especially. That is to say, everyone goes on pilgrimage in the spring, Thoreau will say in those opening lines. We've of course talked Thoreau at learnstrong.net. And he says, I had my share of good luck, though there were some curious specimens among my visitors, and then he begins to talk about them. And he talks about the half-wits. He says, with respect to wit, I learned that there was not much difference between the half and the whole-witted person, right? He continues to make some of these kinds of observations. He says, I require of a visitor that he be not actually starving, though he may have the very best appetite in the world, however he got it. Objects of charity are not guests. Men who did not know when their visit had terminated, though I went about my business again, answering them from greater and greater remoteness. In other words, know when the conversation is over, know when it's supposed to be done. Men of almost every degree of wit called on me in the migrating season. Again, the migrating season is Chaucer's spring, right? Some who had more wits than they knew what to do with. Runaway slaves with plantation manners who listened from time to time, like the fox in the fable, as if they heard the hounds obeying at their track, and looked at me beseechingly as if to say, O Christian, will you send me back? One real runaway slave, and we'll think as well of Whitman in Leaves of Grass with this same reference, among the rest whom I helped forward toward the North Star. That is to say, Thoreau will say, men who were slaves trying to escape the horrors of slavery, I had to help to the one North Star. He said, I could not but notice some of the peculiarities of my visitors. Girls and boys and young women generally seemed glad to be in the woods. They looked in the pond and at the flowers and improved their time. Men of business, even farmers, though thought only of solitude and employment, and of the great distance at which I dwelt from something or other. And though they said that they loved a ramble in the woods occasionally, it was obvious that they did not. Restless, committed men whose time was all taken up in getting a living or keeping it. Ministers who spoke of God as if they enjoyed a monopoly of the subject, who could not bear all kinds of opinions. Notice his list of critiques here. That is to say, people are too busy to actually enjoy the woods, or ministers of theology who are certain epistemologically they have all the truths. Again, Thoreau, the fallibilist, I think I'm right, I could be wrong, right? Doctors, lawyers, uneasy housekeepers who pried into my cupboard in bed when I was out. How come, miss, and then he gives a blank, to know that my sheets were not as clean as hers? Young men who had ceased to be young and had concluded that it was safest to follow the beaten track of the professions. This beaten track, put a note, we'll come back to it in the conclusion, and the way in which he says that his track from pond to hut was a beaten track. The beaten track of the professions. All these generally said that it was not possible to do so much good in my position. In other words, the doubters, the naysayers. We'll go back, of course, to Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how often lonely rooms amid the den of towns and cities have often been sensations sweet, blah, 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 right? He said there was the rub. And of course, the use of the rub will immediately take us to Shakespeare's Hamlet and to be or not to be. And that's that polarity I keep talking to you guys about, to see it, right? The old and infirm and the timid of whatever age or sex thought most of sickness and sudden accident and death. In other words, many people were like, how come you could live so far away from the town where the doctor is? And he says it this way, what danger is there if you don't think of any? And they thought that a prudent man would carefully select the safest position where Dr. B might be on hand at a moment's warning. To them, the village was literally a community, a league for mutual defense. And you could suppose that they would not go a huckleberry without a medicine chest. In other words, they were so worried about dying, they never got around to living. The amount of it is, if a man is alive, there's always danger that he may die. As we've said in 303 many times, you ain't met no 200-year-old people. They were teaching you from the time you were quite young, at the park, swinging. We got to go to the van. I don't want to go to the van. I want to keep swinging. No, honey, you don't get to swing forever. You got to go to the van. The van's always been waiting. And Thoreau will say, the van's always waiting. That is to say, we've always got to go to the van. You don't get to live and swing at the park forever. So, he would say, swing well, right? Swing well. He says, the amount of it is, if a man is alive, there's always danger that he may die, though the danger must be allowed to be less in proportion as he is dead and alive to begin with. It reminds us of what Martin Luther King Jr. said, some people are already dead, we're just waiting for them to stop breathing to prove to us what we've already known about them long ago, right? A man sits as many risks as he runs. Take a risk, that's called living your life. Finally, there were the self-styled reformers, he will say, the greatest bores of all, who thought that I was forever singing, this is the house that I built, this is the man that lives in the house that I built. But they did not know that the third line was, these are the folks that worry the man that lives in the house that I built. I think in some ways Thoreau is not just speaking to people who came to visit him. I think he knew that he would have a whole collection of naysayers as they were reading Walden, who would say things with, well, yeah, but he's just a hypocrite because he really didn't blank, 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 whatever that is. And I think he realizes that, you know, in the end, you got to go your own way. I'll go mine. But please understand, I have to go my own way. That is to say, leave me alone if you can't engage and join in my search. He said, I didn't fear the hen harriers, but I kept no chickens, but I feared the men harriers rather. He said, I had more cheering visitors than the last. Children came a-bearing, railroad men taking a Sunday morning walk in clean shirts, fishermen and hunters, poets and philosophers. In short, all honest pilgrims. And again, see, this is that Chaucer language, right? All honest pilgrims who came out to the woods for freedom's sake. And it's there that I think Walden, the hub of Walden is this notion of freedom. And really left the village behind. I was ready to greet with, welcome Englishmen, for I had communication with that race. Well, this is a beautiful chapter, right, that speaks directly to this notion of what is communication and how blessed an experience it is to have a really good conversation, right? I think of that Last Samurai film, right, when Tom Cruise has that conversation with the summer and he says, good conversation. They haven't said much of anything. Well, let's come back for Chapter 7 and the bean field and Thoreau's notions on work. Quite compelling. I hope you're enjoying the study. Thank you.